Vince Tinnirello of Anchor Network Solutions is here to talk about interesting acquisitions by IT Glue and Pax8, Sophos' new XDR solution, Cytracom's new team texting feature, ticket management tips, and more, plus a special guest interview with Ingram Micro's Darren Gottesmann. It's ChannelPro Weekly number 185, Punched in the Mouth. Hello and welcome to ChannelPro Weekly, episode 185. My name is Matt Whitlock, technology editor, online director, and your host of this program for the folks like our guest host, in fact. They are the VARs, the MSPs, the IT integrators, the IT consultants. I said MSPs, that stands for managed service providers. So I will say, if you didn't know that MSP stood for managed service provider, you are probably not in the right place. However, if you'd like to learn what that means and what those folks do in hopes of getting a better job someday, I encourage you to stick around and have some fun with us and learn. Joining me each and every week is my awesome co-host here at ChannelPro Weekly, the man of the hour, the man who rocks black on black with black spectacles and black slick back hair. It's like he's like a walking shadow. I don't know what he is, but I can tell you what he is, and that's a pretty awesome guy. Executive editor Rich Freeman.
Well, thank you very much, Matt. And I am going to bust a myth right here now about the glasses. Everything else I'm wearing is black. These are like stainless steel, but something about the lighting makes them look black.
Oh, they are saying they're not, yeah, because they really do look black on camera for sure. I will say too, I said the black slick back hair, and I know it's getting a little less black these days up there, Rich.
Yes,
yeah,
indeed.
I'm running into that problem too. You know, getting a little bit lighter up on top, and certainly a little less of it in my case up here. So, well, it's good to have you here. How's your week going?
Good. And let's acknowledge we're back after a week off because last week at this time we were doing another of our fabulous events.
It's true. And this was one of our ChannelPro SMB Forum, our events, our lead events that are usually in person. But this one was not. We had this one planned to be in Chicago last week. And unfortunately, the restrictions in the Chicago area just made it impossible to host an in-person event unless everybody stood outside in the parking lot in different cars spread. It was going to be a big mess. So we did it online, and I still think it was a success. Rich, tell us about that event.
Yeah. Oh no, it was a great event, and I guess what I'll point out is you're absolutely right. I mean, that one was a virtual only event, but this was the first of 6 SMB Forum shows we'll be doing in 2021. And the 5 coming up, as far as we know, we certainly hope this is the case, will be what we're calling hybrid events. So we will have a live in-person audience, plus we will be streaming them online for people who aren't within driving distance or would rather attend that way. And the next one is was it June 9th?
June 9th?
In Dallas. Yeah.
So if there's any luck, we will be like physically side by side in the same room. How weird will that be, Rich?
It will be. It'll be very different. I honestly can't wait.
Indeed. So I do want to also point out too for our longtime ChannelPro Weekly listeners, a couple things. One, if you didn't catch that event we did last week online, ChannelPro Weekly was a part of that event. Rich, how were we involved with that?
Well, there was a session that was sort of a ChannelPro Weekly interview session in there. I mean, the topics that we focused on at the event, and we'll be focusing on them again in Dallas in June, in Atlanta in July, et cetera. A lot of the stuff that you expect, right? I mean, cloud computing, security, running a business, all the stuff that we know people in our audience want to hear about. But I always try to mix in a little content about stuff that people in the audience should be thinking about maybe, but aren't yet. And so there was a session in there where the two of us were interviewing Dave Sobel, a former vendor executive, former MSP. Now he's a channel podcaster, and he's really sort of leading edge on the whole topic of MSP regulations. And this wave that we know is coming of laws at the state level, and who knows, maybe the federal level, governing who gets to call themselves an MSP, what the requirements are, et cetera. And so we did a 20-minute interview with Dave on that topic, and as always, interesting stuff.
Yeah, so for those who are subscribed, there is a ChannelPro Weekly interview that you may not see here on this feed. So you have to go find. We're going to have that on demand. So go find the ChannelPro SMB Forum, a Midwest event online, and check it out on demand if you want to make sure you get every interview Rich and I do together. It was a lot of fun, as most of our interviews are. So with that, Rich, our guest host has been waiting very, very patiently. So let me please introduce our guest host today, because we do have a guest host, and he's a great one. Glad to have him back. He's the managing director of Anchor Network Solutions, a Denver-based managed IT service provider founded in 2002. He's the past chair of the CompTIA Managed Services Community, co-author of the Business Owner's Essential Guide to IT and All Things Digital version 2.0. He also enjoys many outdoor activities and is an amazing mountain climber, as we've learned in the past. Please welcome back Vince Tinnirello. Welcome, Vince.
Thanks for having me, Matt and Rich. It's good to be here. It's always fun. I was excited to be here, and sorry I had to bail on you a month ago when I was sick. I actually was sick with coronavirus, so it's good to be back at 100% and participating in one of these fun podcasts.
All right. Well, we're definitely glad that you're well and okay and back here to join us. I believe this is your third time that you've been on with us as a guest, at least once as a guest host before, and then maybe once as just a guest for part of it. I'm trying to think. That was back in the audio only days, so it's hard to think back that far. But
Yeah.
You keep coming back, so you must have fun when you come on.
I love it. It's fun.
Well, very cool stuff. So for those who may not have caught one of those episodes that you were on before, why don't you tell us a little bit about you, a little bit about Anchor Network Solutions and what you do there?
Sure. Yeah, we're an MSP in Colorado, about a $4.5 million MSP. There's 24 of us. We are an EOS-driven platform business. If you've read the book Traction, it's based on that, and it has been wildly successful for us. As one of our employees said, we've got to do something. We're in 18,000 directions as we're growing, and it has really given us structure, helped us build a leadership team, helped us realize that the traditional MSP model of the owner is responsible for everything is not the way to go. Have a team of leaders. And we don't have a vertical. We specialize in small business. So while that may make it harder, it also makes things easier when you have pandemic times and some verticals are struggling, others are thriving. So it really helped us see our way through that. And I've been, started in the hospitality industry, and 20 years ago decided I'd like to go do something else, and went into technology and have never looked back. It's fun, and I think the most enjoyable thing is helping the excitement of helping businesses determine what they can do with technology, small businesses, and to see that wow factor, solving their business problems via technology is what makes it all worth it.
So I should say, actually, there's a fourth appearance you've made on the podcast, because you were part of our big holiday extravaganza last December as well. But the last time you were guest host, I looked this up just now out of curiosity. The last time you were guest host with us, that episode went out on February 20th, 2020.
Gosh.
Which is like right on the cusp of everybody getting, clobbered by the pandemic and so on. So it's like the perfect opportunity to kind of catch up with you. What's this last ridiculously crazy year been like?
It's been great in the end. The first 2 months were a little, well, not a little, they were stressful and frustrating. So, applying for PPP funds ourselves and focusing on making sure we were going to be good. Dealing with a handful of clients who instantly called with their hand out saying, "What are you going to do for me?" And in my head, I'm thinking, what do you mean? Our peer groups had a lot of conversation around that. Like, you're still delivering the same value. And why all of a sudden are we a bank, right? The client still has the same needs. I think once we got past really March, April, and May, things flattened back out. Everyone settled down. We got them to work. And our leadership team was able to really accomplish things with focus. Once we got clients back to work and it became business as usual, it allowed our leadership team to focus and accomplish some things that we've never really been able to accomplish before. Our team did just fine transitioning to work from home. As always, there's some expectation adjustment in terms of productivity. But aside from that, things have been good. We did see a lot of movement over the summer, which was really interesting. Typically slower months. We saw a lot of transition with some new clients. We brought some on. And then things settled down in the fall. Hiring and firing seasons typically in the fall. But I think some of those prospective clients made those decisions over the summer. And all of a sudden we got to the fall and it was the usual, hey, we got to get these projects done by end of year, crunch. And then it's just continued into January and, full steam ahead all the way around. And that's what we're seeing from our clients and hearing from them with real conversations with them. Full steam ahead.
So did you find that to be an interesting conversation with clients who are asking, to probably lower your fees and stuff? And what an odd time to do that, especially when you're the one who's going to help them stay in business during that time period.
Yeah. And it's funny you say that, Matt, because I had, friends, they would say to me, I would think people need you now more than ever. And it was odd. And especially one of them happened to be, and I don't think they listen to this podcast, hopefully, a country club that I'm a member of. And it was, what can you do to lower your fees? And my response, I wanted to say, I don't know, what are you going to do to lower my dues? Why am I already expected to do this? We pass everything through to the club at cost. And I think, it was initial reactions. People were asked to do it. Club management was asked to do it by board of directors, see where you can lower our rates at any point. We had an oil and gas consulting company say, hey, I don't know if you've noticed, but in addition to the pandemic, oil and gas is not doing great right now. What can you do to help us? So some of it was hard, and that one was hard because they were a high need, high touch client. It's like, I don't know that we can do anything less for you, right? And it was a big dilemma I'm in an MSP Ignite peer group. The conversation came up a lot. We did not enjoy those conversations. We had probably 4, and everyone in the end really was great. Just like, what can you do to help us? The real opportunity was our client success team, which performs VCIO services, helped with things like ISPs. And ISPs did give a break. I think we saved one client $3,000, where we told the ISP, the building's closed. And the ISP gave the client a 2-month break in their fee. So that really, and maybe a true up of some Microsoft licensing. And, we lost one client out of the whole experience who wanted to go time and materials. And then they didn't like what came with that, which is time and materials, a bill that goes up and down. And they didn't like losing priority service and getting first available and they didn't like reactive. When we talked about it up front, of course it was, yeah, whatever it takes, just lower our bill, right? Then you start delivering the service and it doesn't match. So, but those were not fun conversations, but they all worked out in the end.
Yeah, you probably don't need that bottled water service when the building is shut down. But right. the guy who can use technology to keep you in business seems kind of important.
Yeah, and most all our clients got that. I think some just went into pure panic mode right away, as I think everyone did. And then they saw that things actually went just fine. Country Club, as an example, was really concerned about their food and beverage. And we've built now like 6 country clubs. You'd think like, wow, food and beverage business, the special events. Well, golf boomed because people wanted to be out and about. And while they couldn't do special events, they did just fine with dining and takeout until restrictions lifted and they could do outdoor dining. And then I think it turned out they had one of their best years. So I think there was, it was that initial panic.
Well, maybe you should have given them a small break in exchange for guaranteed tea times whenever you want.
Right. I should have.
So what's your take now? We're in a period where, back then when we were gone, we were getting ready to go into shutdown, and the world was starting to hunker in. I'm sure you were trying to get all your clients to work at home for the ones that needed to work at home. But now you're kind of in the opposite spot, right? Now we're we're in a time of vaccinations and people being less fearful, and a lot of people talking about going back to offices, which I think we know that there's going to be some companies that never go back. But I think you're on the boat that a lot are going to go back. What's your take on where things are going?
Yeah, I think that was a honeymoon. We kind of chuckled internally, our company, like, all right, yeah, you say you're not going back, but just wait and let's see how that plays out. And all the national news stories, oh, we're all just as productive at home. No, you're not, right? You miss out on that. You realize that you miss out on collaboration and culture. And so we see many clients going back to the office happily, and it's worn thin on them. So, right now, really, I think that trend, while we were worried about what happens if everyone wants to go back at once, the reality is they started transitioning on their own back to the office, and it's been really kind of a non-issue. We also have talked to clients a little bit about, hey, when you're working from the office, security issues are fewer and far between from all the different entry points that people might have at home. And we think things are just going to continue to progress. And in our client advisory board meeting last week, we were all kind of forecasting the fall is, when we're going to start to see people really move back to in office. And aside from that, business as usual. Our lease is up this summer. We're going to go month to month and probably develop some more flex space and not have an office for each and every person. But yeah, aside from that, business as usual.
Yeah, I'm hearing that term a lot, hot desking. A lot of companies are looking at hot desking solutions.
Yeah.
So
especially when you have staff that's in the field, right? Like to pay for, 3-4 offices where people aren't there most of the time because they're out in the field. It just doesn't make sense. I actually haven't been to our office in 1 year. I haven't been there. Our other members of our leadership team, department heads are clearly there, but I haven't been. And eliminate the distractions. It actually, I've worked from home remotely prior to Anchor, and it's a real good fit for how I work. When I tell peers that I haven't been to the office in a year, they can't believe it.
Wow, there's going to be a pretty thick layer of dust in that office by the time you go back.
I gave it up actually to the rest of the team. I just gave it up and said, take the space. I don't need it. It's not exactly a convenient location for me, so it's I'm not sad about it. I miss seeing the people for sure, but I don't miss the drive.
But before we go into, so do you think that the new normal, because I know you believe that a lot of people are going to go, people are going to go back to offices, and I think businesses are going to require it. But do you think they're going to be a lot more open on part-time in office? There's going to be a lot more work from home than we may have saw before that, but you'll still go to an office occasionally?
Yeah, I think we'll see more of that, more of the flex space. In the office 3 days, work from home 2 days. I do know some businesses are drawing a line in the sand, like, no, we are an in-person business, so you will be required to come back to the office. I would encourage anyone who's thinking of drawing lines to talk to their employment-specific employment attorney. And we're in a wait-and-see mode here on some things of what will require or not require. So I think we'll see that. The bigger thing for me is really around, I think economic impact is about to catch up with us. Availability of goods, IT stuff. When a 2x4 costs a ridiculous amount of money, and we see, pipeline and gas, and try ordering a piece of furniture and like we did last week, and it was, we'll have that for you in December, right? I'm just concerned that overall we're about to see some things in the society and economy change that cause disruption in how people are spending money in business. I feel like it's going to catch up, just a spidey sense.
There's something to that spidey sense. On a personal note here, like my wife and I have been trying to get our basement finished for a while, and we were going to pull the trigger on that this year until we realized, looking at all the costs of just plywood and 2x4s and materials, it's going to cost like 3 to 4 times the amount to do it now than it would have 2 years ago. So we're like, nope, we're delaying for a little while. But for those who can't delay, yeah, there's going to be some interesting cost increases for the year. That's going to affect a lot of things.
And it has that ripple effect, right, into SMB. And then they start thinking about, their staff and, okay, should we do this? Should we pull the trigger? Should we wait? And I think that what we saw last year with the pandemic, that's what small business owners do. They go right into cost cutting mode. What do we do, right? And it's pretty natural, but I think it's almost a little bit of knee jerk, right? So I'm just curious. Things are looking great now, and I'm not trying to be pessimistic or negative. I'm trying to think a few steps ahead and be pragmatic. Like, okay, yeah, people are buying a lot of hardware. They're doing a lot of this. They're doing a lot of that. But as things catch up, I know we're coming out of pandemic, but it just feels as manufacturing, microchips and vehicles, they can't even get microchips to continue building vehicles. How does this catch up to the rest of business?
Very good point. And it's going to be interesting to see. And hopefully by the next time we have you on, we'll be able to talk about the ramifications of all those ripples and how it affected everything. But we do got
now, maybe, right? And we look back and say, oh, that was all nothing.
Hey, that would be a nice conversation to have for sure. But with it, we got a lot of news to get through and a lot of other stories that we want to talk about. So I want to kind of jump ahead here. So to give everybody a preview of what we got some news from IT Glue and PAX 8 that we're going to talk about. Sophos has a new solution we're going to discuss. Cytracom added a big new feature. They actually announced that the day of our event last week, and that was pretty fun. Then we're going to talk about ticket management pro tips and briefly talk about the biggest zero trust hurdle, which will be interesting. So strap on in. Let's get this ride going. So Rich, I know we've never talked about a story like this ever on the show in our lives. Vince, you're going to be amazed by this. A company in the IT world recently just bought another company. This is earth-shattering, right?
Yes.
So IT Glue bought somebody, Rich, and PAX 8, we're going to talk about these together. PAX 8 also bought somebody as well. The M&A market's hot. Rich, tell us who's buying who and what's happening and how it's going to affect us all.
So these acquisitions, you're absolutely right. Obviously, I can't go a week without writing a story about someone acquiring something or other, right? But these acquisitions are a little bit different. And from my perspective, something happens once, it's an instance. When it happens 3 times in a short period of time, it's a trend. I think we're in trend mode right now on this particular phenomenon here. So what happened is IT Glue bought a MSP consultancy called TruMethods, and people may or may not know the name TruMethods. They probably know the name Gary Pica. That TruMethods is Gary Pica's company. So IT Glue buys TruMethods. Following week, we find out that PAX 8, the cloud distributor, has purchased C-level operations. Again, maybe you know the name, maybe you don't. You may be more familiar with the name Rex Frank. Rex has been an interview guest with us on the podcast before. So, and then both of these things are happening just a few months after ConnectWise bought Service Leadership, which is the company run by Paul Dipple. So there's a bit of a run right now by these significant names in the industry acquiring some of the leading consultancies, leading managed services experts in the industry. And they all put a slightly different spin on why they're making the purchase, but there are some similarities as well. So let's talk about IT Glue first. So they had a bit of an integration between their documentation platform and a tool that Gary and TruMethods offered called My IT Process. And this may or may not resonate with Vince, who does virtual CIO work, but My IT Process is a virtual CIO tool. It kind of helps you assemble the information you need to have a strategic conversation with a customer and then create a plan for them, et cetera. And so you could import a certain amount of information from your documentation into My IT Process before. By virtue of acquiring TruMethods, now they're integrated at the source code level. You can pull in everything you basically need to survey the customer environment into that tool, and it saves MSPs a whole lot of time. There's just a lot of expertise on managed service. Gary Pica, for anyone who doesn't know him, was really one of the pioneers of the whole managed services model as we know it. And so bringing him into the company is just going to be valuable to IT Glue for that reason alone. Rex Frank, similarly, has worked for years and years in the channel, or did so before opening up C-level operations and becoming a consultant. And he is part of a venture that Pax8 has introduced relatively recently. They launched a partner education site called Pax8 Academy. And they have been offering and will continue to offer one-to-many classes through Pax8 Academy. And actually, Rex and his team will be developing a whole new bunch of classes for Pax8 Academy. But Rex will also be doing one-to-one consulting with Pax8 partners. And even doing strategic planning for what he was kind of referring to as maybe the ultra premium kind of partners down the road at some point. Paul Dipple at ConnectWise, ConnectWise bought Service Leadership because they have this amazing database of MSP metrics, and it's hugely useful for benchmarking tools. I mean, I think the common thread that you're kind of seeing here is these companies that have long been, have long talked about the importance of really being a partner to their partners and their resellers, helping those customers prosper, because if your MSPs are doing well, then you're doing well also. I think they've all or are beginning to all kind of take this to the next level, where they're really kind of fundamentally building this in-house ability to provide strategic insight and consulting to their partners in different ways, using tools, using data. In the case of Rex and his group, actually sitting down and consulting with people. But it's an interesting again trend that we're seeing now, where these big companies are spending money to acquire some of the leading consultancies in the industry so that they can get that much better at providing business growth advice and insight to their partners.
Interesting. So Vince, I want to turn it over to you to get your thoughts. Why the rush on why the rush on consultancy? Why do you see them doing this? What's the value? What's the value to you if they do?
Well, you say the rush on consultancy. Do you mean more of IT Glue purchasing a TruMethods?
Right. Yeah. Someone like that. Yeah.
I honestly don't know. I think that the fit of IT Glue and TruMethods together is a natural fit. It concerns me from a higher level perspective of Kaseya owning them, which is a very aggressive sales organization right now, which doesn't always feel great as a partner. We're long-time TruMethods partners, and our business is run on that platform. We use the My IT process, and Gary and Bob know what they're doing, and they built a solid organization, and it's a framework that's helped grow our business. So we're all in, and it makes perfect sense with IT Glue. The C-level, and so I'm glad that those two are partnered together. C-level and Pax8's interesting. When Pax8 first came out, I thought, why would we buy from them? And they've done such an amazing job. They're right here in Denver, great partner. They are helping us with our cloud practice. C-level had a lot of experience in the ConnectWise community. We're very successful there. And I'm excited that they joined Pax8 because I think they can help us. They do a lot of coaching, probably can help us on our service desk operations. And I don't know if they'll go this route, but I think there's a lot of opportunity between Pax8 and how they already help with cloud projects of some kind of staff aug temporarily, on project services. Many MSPs don't have the skill set or the bandwidth to handle all the project business they have. So I'm really excited to see where that partnership goes together. But both of those acquisitions are great. We're excited about both of them. The Paul Dipple one, obviously, they've been married to ConnectWise for a very long time. They've had a tight relationship. It makes perfect sense from a business standpoint as well.
Interesting sort of follow on or side note there, because you folks are doing virtual CIO. When I was interviewing Fred Vacola, the CEO of Kaseya, IT Glue's parent company, as you say, about the TruMethods acquisition, one of the things that he dove into a little bit to explain why they made that purchase is just that they really believe that you're going to see more MSPs offering virtual CIO. So they see an advantage for themselves in having this especially tight integration between documentation and the My IT process tool. But one of the things Fred said that kind of jumped out at me is he said, and this is all kind of guesstimation, right? But he said, if you were to go out and survey MSPs today, he figures maybe 1 out of 30 of them has a virtual CIO service right now. And he said, 2-3 years from that, it's going to look more like 1 out of 5. And those companies are going to have a real edge over the competition. And a lot of this again comes back to the common thread about all 3 of these acquisitions we're talking about here. I think there's a sense that the big winners in managed services going forward are going to be the ones who can have a strategic conversation with their customers. And so part of what Kaseya and IT Glue are trying to do is position themselves to be the best platform for people who get that and want to have that kind of virtual CIO service.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I think you helped me articulate what I don't love from a high level. Gary built a business around a methodology at TruMethods, and I don't love that one of the big 3, maybe it's 4, but I'll call it big 3, now owns the methodology, the system. Because I'm not, I don't love, and it wouldn't matter which of the 3 owned it. I don't love that. It feels strange. Like, maybe it's because I've considered it a methodology that TruMethods, it just stood on its own. And so hearing that it would either be a ConnectWise, Kaseya, or Datto methodology, I don't like, that doesn't feel right to me. It makes sense that, of course, they see opportunity of get more people doing CIO stuff. With TruMethods, it just felt different. It felt like spreading the love to the community. And Gary's a sales guy, right? He's got a sales organization, but it still felt like partner first. And I think sometimes with big vendors, it feels like sell to you first. And so I agree with Fred, although I think the number's much smaller than that. I don't think it's 1 in 30. I think it's probably more 1 in 15. And it currently is still one of our differentiators. All right, so now this goes out to the masses. Now we've got to find a new differentiator. That's the natural evolution. What's ironic about it is we're very specific in our sales presentation, because if you lead with, we provide vCIO consulting services, you talk to the prospect and you say, ask the other firms you're meeting with if they do the same thing. What do you think their answers are going to be? They're always going to be, yeah, we do that. We do that too. But in reality, to Fred's point, they don't. They don't do it. They think they do, but they don't do it. So this might level the playing field more if Kaseya helps that reach get to more partners, including the smaller ones, to where they see that this is a big enough deal. Most of those partners still are completely reactionary. Yeah, we were wondering when that server was going to blow up. Yeah, we were wondering about that, when you'd want to do that. Or it's more reactionary and transactional around, we need to renew your server warranty, as opposed to what's the purpose of your server. So it's going to be interesting on that front. And if they own the brand, if it become right and it's a methodology.
And that, just a quick nuance there, because, on the one hand, you're absolutely right. I mean, IT Glue and by extension Kaseya, they own TruMethods, so they own the TruMethods methodology. But it is worth mentioning, and Gary made a point of stressing this when I was interviewing him about this acquisition. As you may know directly, I don't know. I mean, Gary has the My IT Process tool. He also runs peer groups, and it was actually written into the deal with Kaseya that the peer groups operate exactly the way they did before. They remain independent. So, I mean, from that perspective, if the way you are ingesting the methodology is through one of, the Gary's or one of the TruMethods peer groups, then at least according to the contract, you're not going to see anything change there. And there was, Gary made it very clear they're not going to require everyone to standardize on Kaseya and that kind of a thing. But at the same time, it's not like IT Glue bought part of TruMethods. They bought Gary and the whole team. Yeah,
I just buy into their process so much, and it's felt so, pure and independent. Like, here's a methodology. No matter what tools you use, you can be successful. And I'm sure Gary's staying involved for a while, and so I'm sure that philosophy won't change. And let's face it, MSPs moan and groan all the time about acquisitions. Sometimes it's silly and they don't have the right perspective, but you build a business ideally one day to hopefully sell it and benefit from it. So you can't fault them for that, right?
No, you sure can't. And Rich, you mentioned that Rex Frank has been on the show before, and that's true, he was. We have also had Gary Pica on the show indirectly because we recorded a Channel 4 Weekly interview with him during a live event. But we did put that in episode 156 for people to watch. So check that out if you want to see us interview Gary Pica and Rex Frank, Rich, and because I know you're dying to know, was on episode 140. So if you want to check those out, if you want to get a little more backstory on those two. Yeah, we'll see what happens. It'll certainly be interesting. I was going to ask about the peer groups, if they were going to merge them, if they were going to keep them independent. So that's interesting that they're going to keep them independent. Does C-Level operate peer groups, or are they just more of a consultancy and educational resource?
Yeah, the latter. As far as I know, Rex doesn't have a peer group organization.
Okay,
it's funny, the peer groups that are independent, like an MSP Ignite is one. I think Taylor is also independent. They'll probably thrive from people who want independence, right, and not be platform specific. There's definitely a strong need for that out there, where you want independent platform, right?
That's true. I mean, it's hard to differentiate if everyone does the same thing you do. So
there you go.
I agree that this is going to be interesting for those who may have relied on TruMethods and in the past and might look for something a little different now to be different. We'll see how it goes. Well, we'll link to these two stories so you can read a lot of the quotes and get a little more of the backstory that's in here and some of the rationale. We do that by putting a show sheet up at channelpronetwork.com. So go find the show sheet for episode 185, and you'll be able to find all those. If you're watching on YouTube, open up the description area. We'll put links in there for to all of these stories for you. Not just these two, but every story we talk about, we'll have links available. So, Rich, I guess we'll move on to the next story, which is about Sophos. Now, Sophos has a new solution that they are touting out there in terms of what is this? XDR. Is this a brand of Sony TV that they're introducing? No, that would be XBR. Rich, tell us what XDR is and why we care.
Yeah, I would be happy to do that, actually, because this is one of the big trends in security right now. So folks might be more familiar with endpoint detection and response, or EDR, but the big hot thing in security right now is extended detection and response, or XDR.
I think people are pretty familiar with Sony TVs, though. A lot of people know what those are.
Yeah. Now you've got me confused. Did Sophos come out with a Trinitron solution, or
that screen, baby? All right, yeah, keep going. Sorry.
So we just since New Year's, we on this podcast we've spoken about an XDR solution from Fortinet. We spoke about another one from Trend Micro, I believe. And now Sophos has entered that market as well. And so the difference between EDR and XDR is EDR, you're getting input from the endpoint, and you're studying that for signs, the ability to detect a breach and respond to it. XDR, you're continuing to get that input from the endpoint, but you're combining it with other sources. And so in the case of Sophos right now, you're also taking input in from their email security software. You're also getting input from the firewall, and you're correlating all that information. Down the road, at some point later this year, they say their cloud security solution, Cloud Optics, will start feeding into the XDR solution. Their Sophos mobile product will start feeding into it. And you're going to be able to detect things that might be invisible to any one of those products because they're all sort of working together. And in fact, when Sophos announced the solution, they also published a case study involving a company that an unnamed but rather large North American business of some kind that had an Exchange server get breached. And then over the course of the next 2 weeks, these attackers in very creative, crafty ways kind of exploited that one breach. They got into the company from different directions. They used different techniques. There's no way any one product basically would have figured that out. But if you can kind of look at different patterns from different products, all of a sudden the trend emerges and you can react. So that's what an XDR solution does. That's what Sophos is now doing along with some of these other vendors. One of the things that they say differentiates their XDR product, most of these solutions have what's called a data lake a pool of information that that the tool is studying for patterns. Sophos has a data lake with 30 days worth of information. That's not so unusual. What they say is unusual is that they are also storing up to 90 days of additional information locally on protected devices, and that essentially extends the data lake and allows them to get a broader view of what's going on out there. The other thing that's significant about this, though, so that, that this is a new product, a new part of the Sophos portfolio, that's significant on its own. But the thing that they introduced the same day that this XDR product came out is something that they're calling the Adaptive Cybersecurity Ecosystem. And essentially, it's a set of APIs. So, right now, and for years, actually, Sophos has been very good about sharing information among its different security products. And they, and I remember this now. This was like almost exactly 3 years ago at the 2018 RSA conference, sitting down with Dan Schappa, who's been on this podcast before. And he explained, he painted a picture to me of something that at the time they were calling Project Darwin. And this was this big long-term vision that he and Joe Levy, the CTO at Sophos, had literally sketched out on a cocktail napkin at a pub in Oxford in 2017. And the idea was, what if instead of just our products sharing information and coordinating response, what if anyone's product could be part of that web, if you will, and what would that take? This that's 2018. So here we are 3 years later, and now the adaptive cybersecurity ecosystem has launched. That is Project Darwin, and essentially it's a set of APIs. It's going to allow third-party security vendors to contribute information to the data that Sophos is drawing on for its product, but also pull data out of there for use in their own systems. And the idea, obviously, is just to extend the cross-vendor collaboration that's happening across security. Because if it's a smart thing for Sophos to be sharing information and coordinating response among its products, it's an even smarter thing if they can pull in products from other vendors that their customers are using, and vice versa. If those other vendors can be coordinating with, in conjunction with Sophos as well. So, we're at a very early stage in terms of the production availability of the adaptive cybersecurity ecosystem, but it's kind of a big deal for Sophos, kind of a landmark for them, and the culmination of a 3-year process.
Lot to dig in there. Kind of funny we made an XBR reference when Sophos has also like coming up with these like cool brand names for these features that they have and then they're coming out with, because Sony was really good about doing that back in the day. Vince, did you ever have like one of those like Sony stereos, or those like old like kind of boombox stereos that you could get from them back in the day? You remember those, all the lights on them that would flash and stuff?
I never had anything quite that fancy.
But one of the things that I loved about Sony back in the day is that they would come up with these really like cool brand names for like the most basic features, right? So like I remember on one of these, it was a Sony one, and it had this big giant knob that you'd use to turn the volume up and down, and above it would say VAX, VACS, and it was like this cool lettering, made it look like this big deal feature, and it stood for the variable attenuation control system, which basically just means you can turn the volume up and down. But it was really cool branding, and I think Sophos is onto something by throwing all this adaptive ACE lettering. We need more acronyms, Vince. That's just what it is. We need more and more acronyms. So lots to talk about here. Now, Rich, I know we've talked a lot about extended detection and response lately, because a lot of companies have been coming out with their own things. I do want to pause and talk about data lakes for a moment, to also find out if they're stocking it with Bass or COD or anything like that for you to go fishing with. But Vince, let's talk about what it does first. Is this something you're seeing a lot as well? Are you excited about this?
The XDR or
Bass and cod fishing, either one.
I would say that the MDR, EDR stuff, yes. Hadn't heard the term XDR before. It's hard to keep up anymore. It's dizzying the latest and greatest, right? Of this tool, that tool. I mean, we're talking a lot with Blackpoint right now, and they do MDR, real-time SOC stuff. And as an MSP, I can tell you that with our security offering, I can't take credit for this. Someone in my peer group suggested it. It might have been Frank Ballatore, who's just retired with New England Computer Group, of building your security offering with a buffer for the unknown tool that you're going to desperately want to have next year. And you don't want to go back to your clients and say, I need $3 more per month per device. And you can't also eat because you manage 2,000 endpoints, right? So fortunately, from that perspective, when a cool new tool comes out, we have room for it, right? And we can swap something out, in or out, and then tell the client, hey, guess what? You're getting this at no charge. So it certainly would be something that we're looking at. I hesitate on pulling in data from other tools and who's actually responsible and is the data correct. So I think we have a reputation at Anchor of not being beta testers. Tell us when it's awesome, and then we'll look at it. Not suggesting that Sophos's product is there, but any latest and greatest security technology, we're all for. And Sophos is doing really cool stuff. They're really cutting edge, and we do use some of their products. So I'm pretty excited to see, where they take it. It'll be great for our team.
So Rich, in this, did they kind of contrast their XDR solutions and what they're doing against some of the competitors who've recently done it? How are they positioning themselves, and what are the requirements in order to utilize? If you're a Sophos customer, what are the requirements in order to utilize this new feature?
So the chief differentiation, the main thing that they point to in terms of distinguishing their product from other XDR solutions is the depth, the amount of data that you can draw on. We probably don't need to get into the details, but there are some features around querying. So there are some capabilities in the system that a security analyst, in particular, I think would really appreciate in terms of getting some artificial intelligence-based sort of assistance from the tool in terms of pivoting a query or subquerying. And so there are some ways in which the tool is optimized for research that they say is different from what else is out there. In terms of the requirements, I think right now the minimum requirements are that you do need to have Intercept X, which is their endpoint security system. So if you're licensed to use Intercept X, you can also use the XDR product. Obviously, at that, if all you've got is Intercept X, it's really just kind of doing EDR as opposed to XDR. But that is sort of the minimum requirement. And I'll quickly point out there, actually, that obviously you can't use Intercept X without a license, so you do need to be licensed to fish in the data lake.
Good, and hopefully they pull out some big mouth bass from that data lake, or information about threats would also be good too. But everybody likes fish. Rich, we're definitely starting to run a little long, so why don't we move along here and talk about Cytracom, which has added a business team texting solution. They're very excited about this. Tell us about it, what it does, and why it's exciting.
So the new feature, they're calling it shared inboxes. And so let's quickly rewind the clock to October 2019 when Cytracom, big unified communication as a service vendor, announced that they were introducing what they called business messaging. And basically this is just, they were adding text to the different communication methods supported by their unified communications platform, because obviously we all do a fair amount of texting. Most of us do in our lives. This is one of the ways that people want to communicate with businesses. And so, they really made a point at Cytracom of making text a full-fledged supported technique with, phone, with email, etc. And so now what they've introduced is something that they're calling shared inboxes. So in the past, if you had a Cytracom phone number, or if you're using your personal mobile device to text with people, this was all supported through the Cytracom platform. But what they were hearing a lot from their customers is customers wanted a way to text with their clients or their customers as a company instead of as an individual. Instead of, me texting Rich Freeman at ChannelPro, there needs to be some way for somebody to just text ChannelPro. And that's what the shared inbox concept is. So if you are a Cytracom user now, you can, and I'll just cite some examples that'll maybe make this concrete. If you want your whole sales team to share one text number, you can give them a shared text inbox. Your customer service team can share one text inbox. If you are an MSP, your help desk technicians can all share one inbox. So if I am a client of Vince's, and I know the number, and it's the same number he uses for phone calls into the help desk, I can now also text the help desk at that number. All of his texts are going to get that message simultaneously. They have the ability to exchange messages privately with each other. So I won't see them talking about me to each other, but they'll be kind of saying, this is priority 1, this is priority 2, and hey, Doug, why don't you follow up with them? I'm working on something else. And then Doug or whoever it is can respond to me, and they can all kind of follow that thread. And so it gives people a way to communicate with a company as opposed to an individual at that company, and that's something that hasn't been available from Cytracom before, and they're basically saying really isn't available anywhere in unified communications, as far as they know. And I can't kind of verify this one way or the other. This kind of shared text capability. There are apparently products that do something like this, but they're not unified communications product. They tend to be a little bit customer support center specific and complicated and so on. They're saying basically this is the first UCaaS platform to give people that ability to communicate with a company as opposed to one person at that company.
Well, it certainly sounds cool. I know someone who's been a part of a lot of shared inboxes for email. I know it can get a little chaotic sometimes, knowing what people have responded and managing all that. But Vince, is this something that you've seen a need for, or that you would be excited about?
I haven't heard any, clients ask about it. I think it would be more us understanding the benefits and educating end user clients on how it would benefit them in their businesses. I internally, I could see it to notify all clients that, Office 365 is offline. Like Rich said, there are other products that can do that kind of mass, messaging. So yeah, and I can't say that our team has heard feedback from clients asking for something, but if you can give them examples as to how it would benefit their business, it's a heck of a lot easier of a positioning.
Yeah, it's a neat concept, and I think this would be a fun one to revisit after we see what people do with it, Rich, and then get some concrete examples of how it's been beneficial, because it's a new kind of feature. I'm trying to think of where, like, a case of where this will solve a really big problem. What do you think, Rich?
And I don't know for sure if it will solve a really big. I think a lot of the presumption behind it is just this is how customers want to communicate with businesses these days. In the same way that this is how people want to communicate with other people a lot these days. This is just, so you give somebody a number, you say, here's the help desk number. And they'll call that number and talk to a human being if that's their only option. But if you give them the option of texting that number instead, there are a lot of people who will choose to do that just because they kind of prefer to communicate that way. And it was funny as I was talking with Cytracom about this and reporting on it. I thought back to articles that we've run in ChannelPro where sales experts have said, look, I know you love texting people and that's how maybe you're communicating with your customers, but pick up the phone, talk to them, go visit the office. These personal relationships are important, which I still think is true. And yet there's this kind of, if you can't beat them, join them kind of thinking here that is kind of persuasive to me. Sure, it would be better to actually talk to the customer about, but if what they want is the ability to text you instead of calling you, then offering them that option could actually give you a bit of a competitive edge.
I can see that. I personally, there's a lot of times when I would prefer to text rather than talk to somebody. So I guess if like sometimes I do gravitate towards the chat for customer support, for example, before picking up the phone and calling. Yeah, interesting. I'm on board, Rich. I'm on board, and I hope it goes well for them. But in the interest of time, let's move on to our next story that we want to talk about. I think that's it for news. But we wanted to talk about ticket management pro tips. Tell us about this article, Rich.
Yeah, we went out, and it's funny because we were just talking about Rex Frank and being acquired by Pax8. He was one of the people we consulted for this story, which ran in our most recent issue. But we went out to a few MSP consultants to just kind of get some advice because ticket triage, ticket management. I mean, this is where MSPs live every day, and so what are the things maybe that enable some MSPs to do that more efficiently than others. Not a huge article, and you can get the nitty gritty on this. Again, in the interest of time, I won't dive into it a lot. But some interesting suggestions made by some of the people in this article. One thing you can do if you want to get more efficient at ticket management, one thing you can do is just limit the responsibility of your technician. So I mean, put fewer people on ticketing and responding to tickets, but that's all that they do. Essentially, they're wearing fewer hats maybe than they were before, and it makes it easier for you to measure their success and their efficiency at that. It keeps them focused on what they do, and it makes it a little bit harder for them to make excuses for why there are so many tickets lingering out there. That's all you're doing these days. Why aren't you getting that done maybe a little bit faster? There is, of course, also the idea of hiring a dispatcher or a service manager. And if you're a small MSP, a very small one, this is probably not going to be economical for you. And in fact, Rex Frank has a very broad rule of thumb that he uses is, if you've got 4 engineers or less, say, you're probably not going to want to make the investment in a dispatcher. But when you get to 5 and beyond, it actually can be very helpful to have somebody in that centralized role who understands who's overloaded, who's got maybe a little bit of bandwidth, who's good at this function versus that function. And can also gets experience maybe in prioritization of tickets and can manage that a little bit more effectively than the technicians. There's some interesting discussion in the article about whether or not that dispatcher should have technical abilities, because in some scenarios, if they can actually be maybe not even level 1, but level 0.5, they can kind of filter some stuff out a little bit on their own.
0.5 is still too high, Rich. 0.493 is the number to shoot for.
You hit 0.5 and you've overshot, people. That's a bonus piece of advice from us here. And this wasn't really so much advice as an observation from one of the people in the article, which I thought was kind of interesting. But from a triage standpoint, he says he always tells clients to keep an eye out for tickets that come from a decision maker at your customer. If somebody who signs checks calls in with a problem, those probably need to get up to the top of the stack in terms of what you're going to respond to. But just some interesting advice from experts in ticket managing on tips and tricks you can use to get through more tickets more quickly.
So Vince, I'd be remiss to not go to you and say that you probably have some experience in this field and might have a couple good pieces of advice to share. What would those be? Oh,
I can't wait to read the article. We just redid our service process last summer because we outgrew what was there. And I was nodding my head to a lot of the stuff Rich said. That role is actually a triager. And lots of debate on technical versus not. And, we believe it should be technical, but they don't fix anything. And if they do, it's quietly behind the scenes. But Rich is right. I mean, I can't wait to read this article. Having somebody skilled enough to know, this is easy, go to this tech. This is a little harder, go to that tech, right? So having that technical skill, then also doing the dispatching and saying, you know what, that's a 1-hour job versus a 3-hour job. Somebody who's not technical doesn't know that. The tricky part is, how do you find a person who wants to do that job, right? Because they have a lot of skill, but you don't technically have them doing anything. You have them triaging and directing traffic. So I can't wait to read the article. And I think having somebody in that role right away, even as a small team, is crucial. They can then hang up with the client and fix it in the back end and slap someone else's name on it, so they don't set the expectation that the person who answered the phone fixed it. But the process works. It's beautiful.
To the one of the points you made, I'm curious, Vince. I mean, who did you put into that role? I mean, was it because I've spoken to people who have identified a technician who has really strong organizational and communication skills, and okay, that's going to be our dispatcher now. I've spoken as well to people who have said we took an admin or receptionist, somebody who's like really smart and capable, and we moved him or her into that role. And that person would be less technical, obviously. Who did you find?
We have rotated technicians and seeing if they like it, and they like the, hey, today I'm on triaging. And we've also used our actual service delivery manager. So we envision that as being a full-time seat, kind of a level 3 type seat. But right now, our service delivery manager is doing that, and we have someone else who answers the phone. But we have a triager, and that role that is to talk to the client, make sure we understand what the problem really is, take some of the communication out of it, so then it's not just dumped on the technician. Then the technician can focus on the work and not going back and forth with communication, setting appointments, and it literally has made a world of difference. And the other thing we've done is started to hire nothing but level 3 technicians. And that helps as well, because man, you can, it's Apple's model. You can resolve things much quicker. Sure, your payroll goes up, but the old school escalation path, just nothing but frustrate clients. So those two things together are magic.
Good point. And Rich, when you asked him who he got to fill that role, I was expecting an answer like, oh, Brenda. But your answer made much more sense, Vince. And it does sound crucial. So I'm glad you shared that with us. We're gonna put a link to that article online, and it is a really good article. I really hope you all go and read that. Now, Rich, in our notes here, we've got a brief mention. We definitely are coming up on time here on the clock. So give us a brief mention on the biggest zero trust hurdle.
I'll just tease people with this, and then we'll have a link to this on the show sheet as well, and people can go read the article. But we had a contributed piece of writing that's running on the ChannelPro website now. It came to us from Bruce McCulley of Galactic Security. He, former MSP, now he's 100% all in on security. He spoke at our event last week, and we'll be speaking at other ones. So really deep in that subject. And he was talking about zero trust security and some of the investments that going zero trust requires. And the question his article asked essentially is, okay, you can kind of try to explain that to the customer and get them bought in on spending the money to go full-blown zero trust, but it's going to be a difficult conversation to have. How do you clear that hurdle? And his answer essentially is penetration testing. And he has direct experience with it. If it's one thing to tell them you're exposed, it's another thing to show them they're exposed by conducting a penetration test. And so find the story, Bruce McCulley's story. It's called Biggest Zero Trust Hurdle. Getting people to listen. Like I said, we'll have a link in the show sheet as well, and read up on that, because he talks in detail about a best practice, a technique he uses basically to get past that, well, do I really need to spend that money objection from a customer.
Sounds like a you don't want to miss it article. So definitely go and check that out. And the other thing you want to check out is what we got coming up for you next. We've got a great interview coming up with Darren Gottesmann of Ingram Micro. He's going to be here to talk about, well, actually all kinds of things. So why don't we take a break? And when we come back, we'll be there with Darren and Vince. Be back in a second.
Ready to grow your business in ways you haven't even imagined yet? Tune in to B2B Tech Talk, Ingram Micro's global podcast, to hear what's next in the IT space. Industry leaders, subject matter experts, and more share their valuable insights to provide listeners with the best growth opportunities, with some interesting stories sprinkled in along the way. Listen, subscribe, and follow B2B Tech Talk wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, because it's time to imagine more.
And welcome back to part 2 of ChannelPro Weekly. Around June of last year, about 3 months into the coronavirus recession, Ingram Micro reported strong SMB sales growth, despite what was going on at the time. It's been about a year since then. How are SMBs faring now? Here to talk about that and more with us is Darren Gottesmann, the Executive Director of SMB Sales at Ingram Micro. Welcome, Darren.
Thank you so much, Matt.
I should say welcome back. You actually were on the show with us about a year ago, around the same time. So glad to have you back.
Yeah, thank you so much. Good to be back here.
So I can imagine that not everybody here listening or watching right now may have caught that particular interview with you. So if you can, tell us a little bit about you and what you do at Ingram.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much. And hello, Rich, and hello, Vince. Good to be here with you guys again today as a follow-up from last year. So what I do for Ingram Micro is I manage the SMB business for the US, and I also run a community called Smb Alliance. And I make certain that 20,000 of our partners have what they need to go out there and service their partners. And we're arming them with all kinds of things. I'm sure we'll talk about in this segment here. But at the end of the day, I'm here to support small, medium-sized business and keep the channel technology going.
So tell us a little bit about the SMB Alliance in general. What is that all about? How does that help the SMB partners?
Yeah, so thanks for asking. So when Ingram Micro looks at our portfolio of companies, we have over 20,000 SMB partners out there that are doing wonderful things in the world and helping the end user community with all their technology needs. Then there's a smaller group that says, you know what, I want to have a partnership with my distributor of choice, in our case, Ingram Micro, and I want to get to know our vendor correspondents. I want to get to know the Ingram resources and all the teammates, but at the same time, they want to get to know each other. And they want to have a chance in a platform, and in the past, in-person gatherings, in the last year, virtual gatherings, to make certain that they're networking and forming alliances amongst themselves. So the SMB Alliance is a community, and we partner with about 40 of our top vendor partners and 270 of our customers. And it's a very close niche group, and we're always looking for new family members. And we get together on a monthly basis. We have all kinds of curriculum, and it's truly a technology community. And I would tell you, as we're talking about what happened over the last year, this last year has probably been the most significant year that's been on the books yet, as far as having a community to lean on and having folks to partner with amongst the uncertain times we just went through.
So let's go back then. Let's look at this at the last year. I mean, as Matt said, June 2020, the SMB market from Ingram's standpoint actually looked stronger than a lot of people expected it would, and for some of the predictable reasons in terms of work from home and all the demand around that. So with a year's perspective at this point, what about the last 12 months maybe surprised you most?
Yeah, what surprised me most was how quickly the world of technology, and especially corporations like Ingram Micro and all of our manufacturer partners, were able to work from home, overnight. And we did it out of necessity. And then, we'll talk about technology in a minute, but just the people aspect of how to manage remotely, and I'm certain Vince will talk about that as well in a little bit if he wants to share. But when you have remote workforce and a different, I would say, interaction style, it's not easy. And a lot of the management across the IT industry and across the world had to change. How do you coach remotely? How do you make certain that your team is not burning out? How do you make certain that you're given what you need, not just from a technology, but from a management perspective? So I would say that overall, and not just Ingram, but all of our partners as well, it's, we talked a lot internally about lead with empathy and management empathy and understanding that the world was very stressful over the last year, still is. And how to adjust your management style that you're used to talking to somebody in a one-on-one in person and coaching them, and then how do you do that remotely? So I was very impressed with the way that the professionalism of the industry changed from that in-person, face-to-face to then going remote. And then I would say that extends to the channel and to the partners, that they had to do the same thing with their customers. So it's a little different take on the question, Rich, that I think maybe you were expecting, but the human interaction of going remote versus being in person, it's never been done like this in my lifetime, I'm sure in everyone's lifetime. and it was done very quickly, and it was course corrected, and it was done with a lot of love and a lot of consideration. So that was what I was most surprised with, and also most impressed with.
Yeah, it's a good surprise.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Darren, you mentioned that June 2020, there was this mad rush to still be getting everybody to be working from home, and I'm sure that was a big priority for 6 months, and would be responsible for seeing a lot of sales volume as new hardware is necessary and so on to get remote workforce going. Well, now we're kind of in the opposite of that now. Like, we're kind of on the cusp of return to work.
Right.
So are we seeing an additional kind of sales boom as people go back into the office and they have new expectations for what their work environment is like, or new hardware necessary to facilitate that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So this is my 20th year with Ingram and my 26th year in the channel. And the SMB business has never been stronger. It's never been this strong. I'm calling it the golden age. And I'm telling you, I could see the numbers, and they're tremendous for Ingram Micro. And I imagine Vince will share with us how well he's doing with Anchor. And I'm sure a lot of folks are listening are having great years. And it's a matter of how to communicate differently to their customers, but their customers are listening now more than ever. I think that in the past, technology might have been, you know what, I know we need to invest in technology, but we'll get to that after a few other initiatives. But I believe that technology is the main conversation now. People understand how important communication is, and they understand how critical security is. So not just security, but we can talk about cloud solutions and storage and so forth. But I believe that we have the attention of the world. I believe that everybody understands that if you don't have a well-articulated business plan for your technology, you're not going to be in business. And folks like Vince and others listening, they are the architects, and they are the doers of deeds and the facilitators of this technology. And I guarantee you they're getting callbacks right away where they're not leaving messages anymore.
We should kind of check with Vince, basically, the reality check this with Vince. It's one company, Vince, in your case, and you've had a lot of success well before the pandemic. But I mean, is this a golden age for Anchor as well?
I don't think so. I think it's been fairly business as usual. I think what we've experienced is the initial panic of clients thinking they were going to go broke, applying for PPP funds, calling the handful of clients calling and saying, "What can you do to lower my bill?" And which was quite strange to me. We had a few of those. I think the two areas of opportunity are, obviously around security and cloud for very specific reasons. And I think the challenge, is still around procuring hardware and the availability of getting hardware. But once people settled down a little bit, they realized it was business as usual. I also got, I think we experienced quite the chuckle of, oh, we're never going back to the office. And starting out as a company who did that, we know how valuable an office is. And now we just had a client advisory board meeting last week, talking to clients who are like, we're going back to the office. They'll obviously will be a little bit more hybrid, but I've got some good feedback on that as we continue this conversation. But yeah, is our sales up? I mean, we don't sell stuff, right? We provide services and we procure technology, hardware and software as a byproduct of that. And do we see an uptick on it? Well, yeah, we saw a dip last April and May, dramatic dip. And then it went back up to normal levels and has been at normal levels ever since. So people are buying about the same amount of stuff as they were before once they realized they weren't going broke.
I can imagine that the employees that want to go back to an office are the ones that work for companies who provide free coffee, an unlimited supply of Pop-Tarts, and ramen noodle cups.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, maybe so. The fascinating thing about pandemic was in a blink, taking 1,500 end users and converting them to work from home, and our team really became camp counselors, right? You'd have the office worker who, let's use an attorney as an example, not used to working from home. And how do I print? How do I do this? How do I get my files, right? And calling up and needing to be talked off the ledge. And it was more around, I'm frustrated today. My kids are bothering me. They need homeschooling and, there's laundry to be done. Like, they're just not used to working from home. and frustrated with how to function. Once we got people past that, it really, things kind of settled back down. That was not exciting work. It was grunt work, but I think our team realized it was the most meaningful work they could do. And once we got that piece out of the way, we could refocus then on strategy, the higher level things where you can add value. And I would say that clients overall now, they're finally piquing their interest in cloud solutions, the ones that were lagging behind. They are. There's going to be a tremendous opportunity around, Azure. I think that's a real opportunity in virtual desktop. Security, they're not there yet. They're listening more than they used to. And what they hear automatically is us asking them to spend more money, which we are. And trying to educate them that, all right, if you're going to stay in this hybrid mode, you now have to consider, instead of maybe a few random people traveling for work, if you're a 50-person firm, you've got 50 entry points possibly into your network now that you didn't have before. That's the real challenge, is protecting people who are working from home, and now all of these networks connecting to a corporate one, whether it's cloud-based or on premises.
So Darren, I mean, Vince is talking about cloud and about security. He mentioned hardware before, and just a couple hours ago, I saw some data from an analyst firm that said notebook sales were up 51% year over year in the first quarter of 2021. So I guess hardware is still selling. Are those the areas where you're seeing momentum at Ingram, or are there others as well?
All categories for us are up. Our business is up. Certainly, I agree with Vince, and nice to meet you again, Vince. We just started chatting really when this call started. I agree. Security and cloud services across the scope of 20,000 partners certainly up. And I would say, hardware, as 100% in huge demand. Constraints up front and in certain categories, 100%. But across the entire spectrum, we are seeing great growth, double-digit growth across all categories.
I would add, hardware availability is causing our business problems. So, to kind of reframe, the business as usual on some things, Windows 7 to 10 drove a lot of hardware replacement, right? It just made sense. And then the type of hardware. Well, let's go more laptop this time around than desktop, which is what we had before. So that has changed. And now the availability that we're looking, that is probably the most disruptive thing for us, and keeping people as a result from buying crap. Plain and simple. And we addressed it with our advisory board last week to get some advice on that. So they don't like the lead time, the time it takes. End users are notorious for waiting till the last minute and saying, I need a new computer for someone who started today. Great. Well, thanks for the heads up, right? So while we have checklists and we have onboarding procedures, it only works if people do it. And what happens is when we tell them the lead time is X, and hey, did you happen to notice that giant ship parked in the Suez Canal? We can't get computers. We're changing, they run out to Best Buy and buy consumer grade. And then now it challenges the standardization. It makes it harder to support. And so we're looking at ways to squeeze people to buy what we want. And if they don't want to buy it from us, then they have to at least match these specs. And then is there a setup fee to go along with it? And can we start looking at, say, Ingram Micro and buying, whether it's Dell or ThinkPads in fast ship models? And we've never carried inventory before. We're not a bank. And I work with some MSPs in part of the peer group I'm in and one I facilitate, and some of their downfalls are always around carrying inventory and then not having cash flow. So for 18 years, we've never carried inventory, but we're thinking of doing that because of the availability or lack thereof of hardware to try and meet demand.
I want to talk a little bit, because a year ago, Darren, when we had you on the show, we were talking about, what are partners asking for? What is Ingram doing to kind of meet those needs? I'm sort of curious, what are you hearing now, a year later, from partners in terms of, their issues, their needs? How can Ingram help? And how is that maybe different than a year ago?
I think the communication is different. I think that right now, as Vince alluded to, a lot of folks are waiting for the last moment, and that's pretty much typical human nature, right? The procrastination. But having that call with your Ingram Micro inside reps and field reps and consultants, and really trying to forecast what your projects are going to be, what you're going to need, and make certain that you have everything lined up for that installation. I think the communication has gotten stronger. I think people realize that you do have to plan ahead. I think people realize that, I'm not going to call last minute. The pandemic and different types of constraints might or might not affect a certain project. So let's get ahead and have that conversation. So I would say, to answer your question, communication has improved out of necessity of making certain that you're prepared to help your customers.
How have things changed, and maybe even just looking over the course of the last year? The SMB Alliance members aren't necessarily Ingram's top partners from like a sales volume perspective, but they're maybe your most committed, engaged partners. So a little bit different than partners in general. What has the last year looked like for them, and what are they talking to you about these days?
They're talking about finance. They're talking about how Ingram Micro could help them finance their purchases. In some cases, they're saying, I have a large deal, rather than tie up all my cash flow now. What can Ingram Micro do? And then we talked about different solutions that we have to make certain that they have a comfortable solution. They're talking to us about security options. They're talking to us about some of our new acquisitions of some top security partners to make certain that they have what they need to give to their customers. They're talking to us about, how do we make certain that we leverage all of your vendor relationships, because we want to make certain that now we're still in communication, where I'm certain a lot of vendor partners would visit Vince's office in person and get in front of the team and do different demonstrations. And now, what are they doing in the virtual world? They're talking about marketing in the virtual world, where now they're not having in-person events. And what are some ideas and creative ideas to go out there and not just satisfy the customers that you have, but how are you expanding your sales and your sales opportunities? So coming together and sharing the best practices has been huge for the SMB Alliance. But overall, all those conversations, I believe, are consistent in every industry, and certainly in IT. But people want to hear what the other folks are doing, get some ideas, share some best practices, and grow the business. I mean, the name of the game is to grow. If you're not growing in this business, I believe that somebody else is taking your business from you. So we're here in many aspects, Rich, to make certain that we have all those mechanisms in place to help them grow.
You mentioned sharing best practices, and you said something earlier on in the conversation too about how in this last year the value of being part of a community has never been clearer. I mean, in what ways did the SMB Alliance, the members of the Alliance maybe come together as a community in this last year? What made being a part of a community that much more valuable in these last 12 months?
I think it helped folks get out of denial very quickly and get into strategy. And get into, okay, who are you working with, and what are you doing with your customers? How are you communicating? And again, it's very, I believe, difficult to do that when you don't have, regardless if you're in SMB Alliance or different communities, or you just have a friend that's in a similar technology field or another company, you need someone to bounce ideas off of, right? I mean, everybody comes up with an idea and they think it's great because it's their idea. But the fact of the matter is, not every idea is great, and there's always ideas you can learn from. And I can tell you that listening in on some of the conversations that we help to conduct and create the different types of platforms to have the conversations, security was huge. Cloud services was huge, as Vince mentioned earlier. Marketing was huge. Finance was huge. And people want to hear, not just from their distributor like myself, to say, this is what I would say, look at. They want to hear that the person that's a doer of deeds say, this is what I'm doing. And Ingram Micro is correct. This is an area of growth for us. At the end of the day, everybody is doing the exact same thing. They're trying to succeed. And those that are succeeding have good partnerships, whether it's their manufacturer partnerships, their distribution partnerships, or each other. So we're just bringing everything together and making it very easy for those folks that see distribution as a strategic partnership. We're making it very easy for them. And the conversations, Rich, and some of which you've been involved with. ChannelPro has been excellent. You've been involved with some of our conversations as well in our events, and you hear for yourself what's going on, and people get excited. They're very passionate about these topics, and they love to share.
You know, as we're recording this interview, Ingram Micro is hosting a launch event for its IoT Center of Excellence. And I don't specifically want to talk about this facility or the launch event, but I'm sort of curious. We're talking cloud, we're talking security, we talked about hardware. Where in general does IoT sort of figure in the the sales, the technology landscape for SMB partners at Ingram Micro right now?
It's future consideration. It's what's coming next. If I could go back in time, 20 plus years, I worked for Computer Associates, and we had a product called Unicenter TNG. For those folks who remember that, and I remember at the time we were monitoring 7-Eleven refrigerators with agents, and if the door was open too long, then you get a phone call from a modem to your telephone to say that it was open. So the ideas of technology have always been there, but it's just the technology itself wasn't able to be feasible for everybody to own this and put it out there into the world. IoT is a consideration right now for all industries, and we have an entire team, and we have a seminar going on, as you mentioned right now, being creative and going into industries, not just facilitating what's been facilitated, but saying, you know what, how do we make your work safer, easier, and more effective with technology? So technology is here to answer those questions, but the creativity of what's happening right now, and you can hear about it in some of the seminars that Ingram's holding. It's amazing, Rich, and I'm certain that you guys talk about it all the time in ChannelPro. But it is amazing to solve some of the things that, quite frankly, in the past would have been very expensive. Right now, it's very practical. The future is here, and it's also new revenue streams. You know, everyone has their MSP stack, and they understand what they do well. But then the question is, well, what else is out there? And when do you stop to learn? That's the real question. Is when do you stop to learn what's coming out there next? And do you immediately discount, or do you dive in? And I believe that the folks that are successful, they dive in and they listen and they learn, and they're always keeping the ideas and the new technology in mind in their conversations. And those are the advisors. You know, guys like Vince are out there, I'm certain, telling his customers what they're going to need, not just today, but years down the line.
So Darren, just a quick IoT question, because we here at ChannelPro obviously see a lot of potential in IoT. We have a site around it that we launched a couple of years ago called the IoT Playbook. What in your mind changed over the last, say, 2 to 5 years that really makes IoT a great opportunity, not just for those who are really vested in hardware, but they can make IoT a very profitable service and solution to offer their customers? What changed? What made that happen?
I think it's the consideration of looking at each industry as their own entity, and they have their own challenges, whether it be manufacturing, whether it be banking, whether it be retail. I think the creativity, I think also the acceptance of the consumers and the workers. You know, once the smartphone came about, it changed everything. If you want to talk about what changed everything, it was the smartphone, right? The fact that everybody has a mini computer in their pocket now, where back in the day, if you had this little TV that got one channel kind of fuzzy in your backyard, you thought you were on top of the world. But now the fact is we're spoiled with technology, and we accept technology, and we're okay wearing technology, and technology is part of every day. I'm certain everyone on this phone has argued with a family member over who took my charger, right? So now that technology is not just being spoken about, but it is part of, you know, human nature, as far as I can see. We're open to any ideas. Nothing's too crazy now. If you want to wear goggles while you're up on a tower that have a mini computer that you could talk to and get answers, that's not the future. You know, that's happening right now. So I think it's the acceptance of technology as people. I think it's the entrance of the smartphone, and I think that all the fun stuff that people love doing, it keeps them looking at their phone all day long. But it's all technology, and it's embedded to us. And you know, guys like I think this audience here, I think we're all probably in the same age group. We're the last ones that will remember what it's like to be in life and be in the world and not be 100% accessible all the time, and actually have those the voicemails. You had to go back with your passcode. So the times have changed, and Matt, I think they're never going to change back. And I think that acceptance is not just over the last few years, but it's slowly crept up, and now it's everywhere. And things like IoT are very interesting. They're exciting, but it's actually part of the culture now.
So I want to turn it over to Vince to kind of give you an opportunity to maybe chime in on IoT. And there's a couple of ways we could talk about that. I don't want to dive off into the weeds because I do want to say that I often see the rise of IoT, and you're talking about consumer acceptance, also includes the acceptance of the dissolution of privacy, which is kind of an interesting correlation in my mind. But Vince, are you seeing with your customers kind of looking to the future to IoT, and what kind of solutions are you starting to think about in that realm?
I'll say no, but I'll circle back on a yes. Everybody that knows me is listening to this podcast is instantly rolling their eyes because they know how much I hate the term IoT. It's the dumbest term ever. Then it doesn't even really match. It's like somebody came up with this generic term. But do I believe in it? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's really driven consumer wise as a starting point. But from a business perspective, wholeheartedly, there's opportunity. I think it depends on your verticals. If you have verticals and where you focus, if you have mostly office-driven users, I don't know where your opportunities are, where people are thinking like, okay, am I going to manage their thermostats, their security? But let's think differently. And Level Platforms used to be an RMM tool, and they would point out like we were doing this for years. We were monitoring refrigerators for temperatures, right? Just like Darren pointed out with the 7-Eleven. So that stuff's been around for a while. But like Luis Alvarez out in California, they're doing stuff agriculturally. Like they are doing cool IoT stuff to manage like vineyards, agriculture, and think of the value that his firm can provide. That's turned into a niche for him and is great for his business. So there's an area where I point to a vertical where it makes a ton of sense, and there's great opportunity. Ski resorts. We're talking to one right now, and they have IoT snow guns. So that means that at 3:30 in the morning, the operations guys don't have to get out of bed when the temperature drops, go onto the mountain and literally turn those snow guns on to start making snow early season. Making, a firm like ours, helping the client make sure their stuff is up and running, really, really cool, right? So there's plenty of applications. A trucking company, we're working with a trucking company, we're talking with one, and they want to be able to manage and track stuff on the vehicles, the trucks themselves. Super cool, right? So I think it depends on the vertical. If you're dealing with mostly traditional office workers, there's not going to be a ton of opportunity. But if you're working with verticals of specialized industry, you can literally be a superhero helping your customer find a solution to their business problem. And that's where the real opportunity is from where I sit.
I'll quickly mention for the audience here, Luis Alvarez has been a guest host on the podcast before. If you're curious to learn more about him and his business, I believe the company's called Alvarez Technology Group, and I'm sure you can find it easily enough online. And see, he's doing all sorts of stuff in IoT. He's really been sort of a thought leader in that area for us. Darren, we've talked about where the market is now. We've kind of talked about the last 12 months. Look ahead, the next 6 months, say the remainder of 2021. What are your priorities, the priorities for your organization? What are the things that you're really kind of most focused on?
Thank you, Rich. That's a good question. So we're going to continue what we're doing. I would say that two of the areas that Vince and I both touched on, security and cloud services, 100% keep expanding, keep on investing in different types of educational tracks and different solution providers, no question there. We're going to keep on investing in our financial solutions to make certain everybody out there that's working with us is very comfortable of how they're going to finance their projects through us. I would say, as you mentioned earlier, IoT is certainly a big investment for us. We have an event coming up for our Smb Alliance membership, and we're focusing a lot on strategy. And we're having keynote speakers come in and talking about the strategy overall and how to grow that business. So, we have two sides of this conversation. We have the business and making certain everybody understands we have what they need and we can expand upon those categories and bring in experts, but also how are you growing your business? A lot of folks that are coming to Ingram Micro that are young companies that are either born in the cloud or are looking to come over from a different relationship. They want to understand how to grow their business. So growing their business as well in not just Smb Alliance, but TrustX Alliance is huge for us. And the Unplugged event that we have coming up, we're having 2 keynote speakers that are, I would say, not traditional speakers. We have Holly Holmes, which is a UFC champion, kickboxer champion, and a boxing champion, talking about the strategy of the fight. She's talking about how to create your strategy, and then how to course correct, and then how to learn from the wins. Then we have an actual author named Becky Sheets, which is speaking about the SMB, the Art of War for SMB. And that's based on Sun Tzu's book, The Art of War. So we're always looking to be very creative and also get things very thought-provoking as far as what is your strategy, how are you working with ChannelPro and learning from all of your publications, how are you working with Ingram Micro and all the manufacturers that we represent, and then also how do you work with each other if you want to. If you want to join one of our communities, we certainly have all 4 of those aspects lined up for the future. And as far as business is concerned, we're growing. We are partnered very strongly with the folks that want to work with Ingram Micro. I think right now people are finding that to be very lucrative for them. They're communicating with us ahead of time. We know exactly what they need from us and vice versa. And we're looking forward to the channel just keep on growing.
Hey, Darren, that that presentation from the fighter, I'm smiling here. I think back to Mike Tyson saying, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
Yeah.
Like, because I'm thinking that presentation, like, okay, I keep getting hit with this hook in the face. Maybe I need to stop and do something different. So I stop getting hit in the face. I bet that's going to be a cool presentation to hear. How do I stop getting punched in the mouth?
You know what's cool about it? I did have a chance to speak with Holly ahead of time prior to her talk. And, you know, a lot of my team was kind of curious of how that was going to go. But when you think about it, you think about, you know, our industry and then think about a fighter, the amount of work that someone like Holly talked about that she goes through with her team ahead of time. And she talks about her training partners that emulate the opponents. And, you know, she's just a very humble champion, but the amount of work that goes into her stepping into the octagon, it's amazing. And then you think about yourself, well, when I go to an appointment, what is the work that I put in prior? Right. And how much prep am I doing versus, you know, a fighter, which is spending, let's say, you know, 3 months just preparing for that one opportunity. So it's very humbling. And Vince, thanks for saying that, because we do love bringing in things outside the industry to kind of motivate and to learn from and hopefully not get punched in the mouth. So
yeah, that's cool.
Thanks, man.
It's funny. Every morning when I get up, I always say to myself, you know what? I'm going to try not to get punched in the mouth today.
How's that working for you so far?
If you've ever met my wife, not well, I will tell you. So we got time for one last question. And I want to go back to the last time we were on, because we were talking a little bit about video games, and you noticed my NES collection behind me, and we were talking about games a little bit. So let me ask you a question. If you could choose 1 or 2, like, classic NES games that you loved back in the day that haven't been remade or redone, because like they're making all, like, it seems like they're redoing or continuing on all of the old franchises from like the 80s and 90s when the NES and SNES were big. What game would you want to see like redone or brought back?
And that question's for me, correct?
That's a question for you.
Is that for everybody? Oh, for me, I would say, I don't think Gunsmoke was ever remade, was it? I don't remember that one. The Old West, when you walk downtown and you're firing your 6 shooters and you're picking up boots and stuff. I like that game a lot. That was fun. And also Legend of Cage. Do you remember that one?
I do. And I think they did remake Legend of Cage.
Did they? Okay. So I'll disqualify that one. And I'll say, let me think. I like Double Dribble. I like the basketball game. That was a good one. Or we could go with Tyson's Knockout, which Vince just alluded to Mike Tyson. So that was a fun one, which was initially just Knockout. And then the remake was Mike Tyson's Knockout. So either one there. Bring back Soda Popinski. I'm all for it.
That would be pretty awesome. I think they might have redone that one too, because that's a pretty good, at least fairly recently. I think they did that one on the GameCube or the Wii.
You're nullifying all my my suggestions here. Okay, I'll go with
no. Yeah, but you hit home with Double Dribble though, because you know sports games have gotten so complicated over the years, like legitimate sports games. I think a game like Double Dribble, which was, you know, like a good basketball game, but simple to pick up and play and not overly complicated, that would be, I think, a big hit today.
You know, there's one video out there. If you have it in your garage or collection, it's a gold label of track and field. I think it's like worth, I forget how much, $100,000. It's out there somewhere. So if you have it in your collection or in your folks' house, don't throw it out. I saw it on eBay going for big bucks. That was like the premier game that I think it came out, but nobody wanted it, so it became very valuable. So if it's out there, make sure not to throw it out. Vince, you're going to say?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. You're right. The sports games are just ridiculous now. Some of them, and I play a couple here and there, like John Madden or NHL hockey. The controller settings and options now, like, do you want 1996 settings? No joke. I'm like, yes, give me 1996 settings. It's like pass, shoot, check. That's all I need.
Yeah, my son plays the NHL hockey, and you're right. Like where they got the what they call that, the stick system or something like that.
Yeah.
It's crazy complicated.
Yeah, I can't do it. I'm not skilled enough.
Awesome stuff. Well, Darren, thank you so much for being on with us and talking with us this week. If anyone wanted to learn a little bit more about you, get in touch with you, or learn more about Ingram Micro and the Smb Alliance, where can they go to do that?
Darren Gottesmann, Darren.Gottesmann at ingramicro.com or LinkedIn. Easily get a hold of me. Love to chat about technology. Love to help your business grow. I've been dedicated to SMB companies my entire life and dedicated to the channel as well. So I'm here as part of the overall team. I love nothing to see folks succeed and reach their potential. And whatever we could do at Ingram Micro to do so, it's our pleasure.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Darren. I hope we have you back on again here sometime in the next coming year. Would be great. And for those who are listening too, and we're interested in learn a little bit more about Luis Alvarez, that episode was where he was guest host was episode 151, titled 8 Essential Vitamins. Great episode. Definitely go and check that out. And on that note, we are going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to be on the other side with Vince Tinnirello, wrapping up the show with some of our regular end of the show features. So stick around for that. We will be right back. And we are back with part 3 of ChannelPro Weekly. Rich, great interview with Darren Gottesmann. Always a pleasure to have him on. Any takeaways, any high points there that you wanted to point out?
Well, I mean, it's just, he is not the first person I've spoken to, and not even the first person I've spoken to recently in the world of distribution who says business is pretty strong right now. So it's good to hear. And it sounds like a lot of what's happening is that some of the belated investments, and sort of like Vince was saying, some of the cloud solutions maybe that customers weren't willing to buy before, some of the security systems that maybe they didn't understand the need for before. Now there's some more receptiveness to that. Still an ongoing need for hardware. So, it sounds like things are going pretty well. Broadly speaking, in the SMB channel right now, although I know that there's a lot of variation, company by company. Some companies are just crushing it right now, and I'm sure others are still, having a harder time.
Indeed. Vince, any takeaways, any highlights that you caught out of that?
Yeah, no, everything Rich said, I think he covered it pretty well. The market is strong for all the reasons that he pointed out.
Excellent. Well, it's good stuff. It was a great interview. I really enjoyed it. And we got a few minutes. We're running a little long, but not long enough where we can't play a little game we like here on ChannelPro Weekly called 5 Questions. So Vince, 5 Questions is a game we do where Rich and I will ask you 5 questions off the top of our head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the whole shtick is we are not allowed to pre-write them in advance. We must make them up on the fly. And I guarantee you they will be ridiculous. They're of course will be off topic just to learn a little bit about you and have a little fun. No gotchas, no nothing to embarrass you, nothing like that, but just all in good fun. Are you ready?
Bring it.
All right. Rich, I'm feeling nice today. I will give you question number 1.
Well, thank you very much. So Vince, I think of you, and you have even said this here, I think of you as an outdoorsy kind of guy, but we've all spent a little bit more time indoors in the last year, in our homes anyway, than usual. Have you picked up any new sort of indoor hobbies, activities, skills, what have you?
I attempted to try to learn the ukulele and then gave up because my fingers were too big. We bought a stand-up Golden Tee and a stand-up Miss Pac-Man machine for the basement, so I've done that. And no, just try to school my kids in board games, Connect 4, whenever possible. We might be playing more board games and Uno Attack, but that's it. I tried and failed miserably at ukulele.
All right, I'll ask question number 2 along the lines of board games. What is your favorite board game that you've picked up in the last, say, since the start of the pandemic?
Not a board game per se, but Mexican train dominoes. I don't know why the name is that, but just it exists, and that's been a lot of fun. Probably because I don't have to think hard. It's entertaining. Crack open a beer, play with the family, put on some music. So we play a lot of that.
Interesting. My family, we picked up a board game called Ticket to Ride.
Oh yeah. We've played that one too, but I get frustrated because I always lose. And you get like right to the end, and like you're cut off, but one player can keep going, and we have that game.
It kind of became a big thing in our house and with some friends. I really encourage the expansion pack though.
Yeah. Okay.
If you play that one, mostly because it's very obvious once you played it like 6 or 7 times what routes people have and where they're going. So the expansion pack adds a lot of new routes and a lot of shorter routes to kind of vary the gameplay a little bit. So I highly recommend that. All right, Rich, question number 3 to you.
So I am in Seattle, Vince, and you ask anybody about Seattle, and they're going to tell you it just never stops raining in Seattle, right? And it's probably cloudy here more. It is cloudy here more often than a lot of other places in the country. It doesn't rain nearly as much as everybody thinks. What is the number one misconception people have about Denver?
That it snows all the time. And that when we get snow, it's there forever. It snows, and then the next day is 60. So, shh.
I had that exact experience, by the way. The last time, I think this is the last time I was in Denver, where it was like the high temperature the day before I arrived was like 70 degrees. As I arrived, snow was beginning to fall. And when I left 48 hours later, the snow had all melted away. It was crazy.
It was cold on Tuesday. It snowed, didn't stick. And today it's 75.
Wow. All right. Question number 4. Vince, I think the last time you were on, we talked a lot about your mountain climbing and some of the achievements you've done there, which is amazing. But you do other things too. And we mentioned golf earlier. I know you're a golfer, right?
A terrible one, but I like to golf. I like to mountain bike, ski, and golf. So, yeah.
So do you watch golf? Do you follow like the Masters and all that stuff?
Traditionally, yes. I did not watch one lick of the Masters this year for whatever reason, but I do. And that's one. There's 2 majors. I like watching the British Open and the Masters. But I did not watch the Masters at all this year.
Okay, good. So that gives me enough information to ask my question, because otherwise it wouldn't make sense if you're like, no, I don't follow golf. Who cares about that? So if you could choose to play a game of golf with any famous golfer in history, who would you pick?
Oh, it's Jack Nicklaus. And I might throw in Fred Couples because he's a cool dude. But Jack Nicklaus for sure. I think he'd have a lot of insights, be pretty fun. Good guy.
And what handicap do you think you would have to have for that particular game?
Single digits to not infuriate him.
Awesome stuff. And Rich, question number 5 to you.
So last year at one point, I bought a pair of Apple AirPod Pro, like the higher end noise canceling earbuds that they have, and they're great. I love them. I didn't need them. I just wanted them, and I went ahead and spent the money. What's maybe your favorite? And I'm glad I did. What is your favorite sort of tech splurge in the last year or 2? The one you're really glad you spent the money on?
Believe it or not, most of the time I'm a non-tech guy, being in it all day long. I definitely have gone on a spending spree post-COVID. I'm not sure what the retail therapy is about, but I would say if you want to call this technology splurge, the old stand-up Miss Pac-Man and Golden Tee for the basements have been a great splurge in electronics. Hours of fun with the family.
I think that counts.
All right. Yeah, it's hard to, cause like, is it really technology at this point? It was around in the 80s, but anyway.
Classic technology.
Classic technology. There you go. Vintage. My daughter likes that word, vintage.
I love, and you know what? When it comes to video games and a lot of that kind of stuff, like retro's in. That's what a lot of people are playing, remaking. We were kind of talking about a little bit about that just a little while ago. So
old school, simple and fun, where you didn't have to think. right? And you just played and enjoyed and whatever. Now, I mean, there's so many buttons, movements, this, that. My daughter's playing a Assassin's Creed game from a Greek Empire because she loves Greek mythology, and I'm like, I can't help. I don't know how to do what you're trying to do. I can't help you. She thinks because I like video games, I can help her with everything. I'm like, I have no idea how to do that move.
Oh, they're so complicated. It's really hard to just pick up a game and have fun. And that was one of the best parts about old games, is that you learned how to play it in 10 seconds and then you could just turn it off and then be done.
Yep.
Now it's an investment. Like, you're like, okay, I'm going to buy this game, and can I invest the 85 hours necessary to play it and get through it? And the answer is no, probably not. Well, good stuff. Well, thanks for playing along, Rich. I'm going to send it to you to tell us what we might have missed last week and what we might be seeing in the week to come.
Well, if you want to know what you missed, a great thing to do is go to ChannelProNetwork.com every Friday and look for the In Case You Missed It post written by our own James Gaskin every week there. He's going to round up a lot of news from the week that was that we didn't even get to talk about on this podcast. For example, they've got a new CEO at VMware. HP introduced some new security software this week. StorageCraft now supports Google Cloud Platform on their disaster recovery as a service solution. And then James will also bring you some thoughts about a kid who hacked his mom's Amazon Prime account and ordered 918 boxes of SpongeBob popsicles. Can't make this stuff up, folks. And James will bring you the lowdown on that. Looking ahead to next week, earlier on the show, I mentioned a conversation I had at RSA, the big security conference with Sophos. RSA is happening online. Unfortunately, not happening in person this year, but it's happening online next week. Next week, the ASCII group is hosting its first face-to-face in-person event since February of 2020. I believe they're going to be in Houston. I'm looking here at my notes. That might be in your neck of the woods, Vince. I think that might be in Denver.
Houston's right. They're in Houston.
Okay.
Well,
I know, because I can't go, and I was supposed to participate in it with a presentation.
Well, it sounds like a good week of stuff to come. Big thanks to Vince Tinnirello from Ingram Network Solutions for being here with us. Vince, I'm having a brain problem at the moment. If anyone would like to get a hold of you and learn a little bit more about you, get in touch with you, find out a little bit more about Ingram Network Solutions, where can they go? How can they do that?
Vince at anchornetworksolutions.com, or just I always pick up the phone, so feel free to call the phone number on the website.
Fantastic. Hopefully they do that. And of course, where can you get all this great stuff that we're talking about? ChannelProNetwork.com is the website. You should go there each and every day, make it your homepage. There we go. Articles, news, white papers, downloads, resources, anything and everything you need to help your business grow and make more money. That's what it's all about for all you fine MSPs and VARs and integrators out there. Channel Pro Network, Channel Pro Weekly is the show. Subscribe, and you can get us anywhere podcasts are found. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, blah, 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 you name it. If you like to watch, we're on YouTube. Subscribe to us there. Hit the subscribe button and the bell to get notifications, and whatever other buttons Google makes you press in the future in order to actually have your subscriptions do something for you. And Rich, anything else I'm missing? My brain just completely fell apart. I think 2 hours is my limit.
No, I think that's it.
I think that's it. But we'll be back next week. Although, Rich, you won't be back next week, will you?
That's correct. Yes, you're right. I'm on vacation next week.
Well, this is going to be fun. It's just going to be me. And who's going to be with me?
Manuel Palachuk.
It's going to be an awesome show, folks.
Yes,
it's going to be an awesome show. Make sure you check that out next week in episode 186. We will see you all then. Take care.